the topic of today's event is unlocking sustainable finance, but by addressing the interconnectedness of debt sustainability and resilience investment. And in this session, we are particularly going to focus on the issues facing least developed countries and small island developing states. So without further delay, I'm going to call Tom Mitchell, who is our Executive Director for International Institute for Environment and Development. And sorry, by the way, I am Ritu Bharadwaj. I'm the Director, Climate Resilience, Finance and Loss and Damage at IIED. And Tom here is our Executive Director. So over to you for some welcome comments.
Thank you. I'm just going to check that everybody's got the right channel headsets. Can you hear me okay? I know some people are struggling a bit. Okay, good. Very difficult to speak in the microphone and listen to yourself. So really good to see everybody. Thank you so much for coming. As Ritu said, the work that we do at IIED is trying to make sure that we create a sustainable financial situation for many of the least developed countries and small island states. I think we know that in many of those cases, it's a real struggle. Debt levels are high, debt servicing has been going up. The fiscal space to invest in sustainable infrastructure is under threat. It is reducing. Even the money for education and for healthcare is being squeezed by that debt burden. So what we've been trying to do is to work across multiple countries, but with lots of different providers of finance, the capital stack, but also look at some of the systems challenges to create a much more sustainable debt environment for those countries. So I know there's a lot of people who are going to be speaking and contributing today. Thank you so much for your collaboration with us and with the SIDS Debt Sustainability Support Service, which we've worked on over the last couple of years and is now moving into its operational phase. And our partners in Antigua will talk to that. But Ritu, let me not take up too much time, and let's get into much more interesting content and speakers. And congratulations to you in pulling together such a fine event.
Thanks, Tom. Somehow I couldn't make my own headset work. It's catching signal from some other pavilion. But I'm going to now call Ramesh Subramaniam, who is the Global Director for Program and Strategy with Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. I'll also, Ramesh, before you start, I'll also ask you to briefly introduce what CDRI is, because there are a lot of people here who don't really know about CDRI, and I think you do need to explain to them what it is. But I would really also want you to touch upon the point of how DRI financing can embed climate resilience and increase investment or scale up investment in small island developing states and least developed countries. And what is CDRI really doing about it? Yeah, that's fine.
Is that okay? Oh, good. Excellent. You know, getting used to this mic because you can't speak loud. Anyway, good afternoon. Thank you. So CDRI, I work for CDRI as a global director. I've been with the organization for about 6 months. Used to be with the Asian Development Bank for a long time, for about 30 years, before working on infrastructure development. And I'm not saying it just to be flattering to my own organization. Are you able to hear me okay? Sorry, maybe I shouldn't go near. So it's an organization that's got a singular focus, singular commitment on DRI that is making infrastructure resilient to disasters. Just to give you some orders of magnitude, we know that the world needs trillions and trillions of dollars every year. Developing countries need probably about 600 total $1 trillion on an annual basis. Resilience needs are about roughly 40% of it. Are you able to hear okay? And within that, if you're looking at disaster resilience, which is a subclass of that, you need massive amounts of investment flows. Our analysis shows that every year, at a minimum, developing countries, low-income, lower-middle-income countries need about anywhere between $350 to $400 billion just for DRI, disaster making infrastructure resilient. Now that's one number, but on the other side there is another number which is also $400 billion, which is the losses that countries suffer every year on an average basis. Every year, developing countries across the world, whether it's in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and so on, on average, every year they lose out. So on the one hand, you have unmet infrastructure needs and demands. On the other hand, whatever is invested is taken away to disaster. So CDRI is focused exclusively or singularly on making infrastructure resilient to disasters. Now, on Renu's question, what do we do? And particularly from a financing point of view, what do we do? It's an organization, as you see, 51 countries are members, and it's grown quite rapidly, and 10 partner organizations. We do three things. One is advocacy, because when it comes to resilience, particularly resilience to disasters, it doesn't come naturally. We've been saying that if you look at environment and social governance, the ESG norms, including gender, the world has come a long way. Whereas when it comes to resilience, that fear of God that is there for ESG is not there, unfortunately, for resilience. You don't wake up in the morning thinking that I'm going to make my infrastructure asset resilient to natural disasters if you haven't seen what a disaster causes. Like the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, for example, Indonesia has been investing, but not adequately. So what we do is, number one, advocacy, increasing awareness at so many different levels, not just at the national level, but also at the local government level, where capacity is very weak. So that is number one. Number two is, as a segue, building capacity, because disasters are increasing in frequency as well as intensity. Flood risks are significant, and they are increasing. So capacity, but at the same time, is not increasing in parallel, and particularly at the local government level, at the community level. So the second thing we do is capacity building. Third is tailored technical solutions. Now, I gave some numbers, the $400 billion, just keep that in mind. But the question is, on Renu's, the point that she mentioned, how do you bring in financing without increasing the debt burden of countries? This is obviously challenging. So what we do is look at the fiscal risks countries face from disasters and integrate those fiscal risk considerations into annual infrastructure planning cycle. For example, every country has got annual, some of them have medium-term development plans like 3-year, 5-year plans, is embedding fiscal risk considerations into that infrastructure pipeline planning, show clearly through risk modeling that disasters, unless they are addressed, are going to increase fiscal risks. You can invest, but you're going to lose that. And if we do that, we have seen in a practical sense, many countries, many of them that you see here, members that we've been working with through our awareness as well as the capacity building and particularly the tailored technical solutions, they are coming around and looking to invest. Essentially, the value proposition we are creating is that investing in resilience makes that asset more bankable than not, because you get the value over the life cycle of the asset. Obviously, there is a lot more work done that needs to be done. We are a 5-year-old organization working very closely with particularly multilateral development partners to bring in concessional financing for DRI. Renu, I'll leave it there, but I'll be happy to pick up anything later.
Thank you. Thank you. I am not going to invite our next set of panelists. So, Matt Holmes, who is the Group Head for Political and Government Affairs, Zurich, please come on stage. We have Bart van der Hulk, co-chair of IPCC Working Group 2. And we have Ben Webster, who is the Associate Director for Center for Disaster Protection. I have a feeling that I was trying to connect to my Wi-Fi to see if two of our speakers from this session haven't been able to reach yet. So we are going to start with the panel discussion, and when they join, we'll turn to them. So I'm just going to pass this on. I think, yeah. So, Bart, I'm probably going to start with you.
Okay.
And we know that IPCC this year, and especially in this new assessment, you have really made a huge effort in terms of trying to bring new authors from these developed countries and small island developing states. So from your perspective, how much is research and evidence really important, especially when we're talking about unlocking sustainable finance and addressing that twin challenge for both the debt sustainability and resilience investment?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. Just realizing, listening to Ramesh on this whole mechanism of how you can make investments bankable, right? I'm trained as a climate modeler, so for me this is totally new, But we are so proud that we are carrying, for the first time, a chapter on climate adaptation finance in the Working Group 2 report, because I think the real story that needs to be told by IPCC is a different story than saying, hey, this climate thing is going out of hand, do something. We need to go to the area where we are also giving suggestions of what to be done, but also how to prioritize and also how to motivate. I mean, everybody that is acting as a stakeholder for this business also has stakeholders that needs to be convinced. So we need to provide new stories that can be convincing and compelling. And that also comes with, we need new people that tell the story. I think the IPCC report is not only about what is written, but also by whom it is written, that we need to really consider. And I'm not sure if we have taken a calculated risk by bringing a quite large fraction of authors to the assessment report that have no previous IPCC experience. But we need to bring these new voices in, because otherwise you repeat the story as well. So but it is also, we need to probably also do a bit of internal capacity building to package that story in a proper way. But this example gives already a good illustration of what could an IPCC report contain. It's not only about the quantifying the volumes of money that need to flow from global north, global south, or whatever, but it is also about the fiscal, the mechanistics of how to do that, how to justify it, and how to prioritize it. So I think it's part of the story, but there are so many other stories that can and should be told, but this is just an example.
So I'm going to take my moderation privilege. Can you hear me? No. I think it's working. So I'm going to take my moderator privilege and I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. So a lot of us don't realize the importance of IPCC. The IPCC is important because that becomes the holy grail of all the evidence that lands up in the negotiation table, that gets used to design the NAPs, the National Adaptation Plan, the nationally determined contribution. And a lot of time, LDCs and small island developing states, they've complained that they're not adequately covered, or they're not covered in the same way. A lot of global north authors are the ones who go and cover the issues and challenges of global south. And I really feel that this is really unique about this particular assessment cycle. And hats off to you, and to try to at least bring new authors on the table. But then the question is, these authors would not have the same level of capacity, or is there a way in which you're going to build that ecosystem by which the new authors that have come up in this cycle, they are better able to contribute, have access to better data, or a better access to, and in many ways we've seen that a lot of these authors, they don't even have access to a lot of paid journals from where they can get data and so on. So,
well, I am happy that you bring up the issue of national adaptation plans. As you know, we are also going to produce this update of this technical guideline for assessing impacts and adaptation. That is part of the mission of Work Group 2. And this is supposed to be really a guideline, so it's maybe not an assessment, but we have indeed countries that are benefited most by this guideline in mind. And I don't think we can write a proper guideline by only Global North experts that know exactly how to draft. I think we also need people from the user, say, agency. First of all, because they know what actually the question is about, but also they have access to literature we don't know. There's a lot of literature that we should actually bring into this process, particularly if you look at that guideline, for instance. This is informed by practice. This is informed by political implementation, windows of opportunity, and that kind of thing. We need to sample literature from how these NAPs are developed, how they are implemented, what went wrong, what went right, etc. That is not all academic literature. We also need to go there. And so we need the people that know where that literature is. So they have a great mandate to bring in new resources. But then to the capacity building, yes, we do. For the SIDS report, we were able to secure access to academic literature for all the authors from Global South. We're working on a similar arrangement for the assessment report, and we hopefully that by early next year we have guaranteed that, so that all the Global South have access to academic literature. But we also are really keen to make sure that the author teams are going to operate in a team spirit. There's people in every team that are pretty experienced, and there's teams that are new, and so we also cultivate the spirit of joint teamwork within. We are even going to recruit someone in our support unit that can also step in for additional capacity building requests. So we bring a lot to the table to make sure that these people also indeed can deliver. But let us at least aspire to that the report itself tells the story that LDCs and SIDS recognize themselves a bit better, and that we don't no longer get the complaint, hey, this is not my story. We really want to have this story told by other people.
Thank you so much, Winston. In fact, I'm very pleased that we have one of our Laroania who's sitting here in the audience.
It's very funny that you call me Winston, which is the other co-chair.
Other co-chair. Sorry, Bart.
We are working as a digital twin, or as a twin anyway. So
the two co-chairs always get called as Winston and Bart. So it becomes like the same name. So sorry about that. So I'm now going to turn to Matt. And Matt, I know, we heard about data and evidence, and it becomes really important. It becomes really important that countries or the private sector or whoever is operating and facing the disasters on the front line, they have the right kind of analytics to understand how are they going to really plan for the future. And we do know that insurance sector does do that to some degree. So in what way can insurance sector really help in bringing that evidence to the table, but also motivate the private sector and the MDBs to really bring in that essential resilience investment that is needed?
Thank you, Richie. That's a heck of a question to get started with. There's a lot there. But look, I'm here as a practitioner from the insurance sector side. I'm aware that insurance is not necessarily something that's intuitive to everybody or that we spend a lot of time thinking about. But basically our business is quantifying and pricing risk. I mean, that's what we do. At Zurich, we've been doing that for 150 years. And we've been doing that for 150 years by being right more often than we're wrong in terms of understanding that risk. Now, traditionally, what insurers have tended to do is build their models, map risk, and understand potential loss, and then use that to inform their own underwriting. Sorry, there's a bit of interference. I hope you can still hear me.
No, they have their...
Okay. So I'll plow on through, try and hear myself speak. But insurers have used this data for decades to inform their own underwriting decisions, but that tends to become a bit of a binary discussion. It's a sort of, I'll take your risk or I won't, or I'll offer you a price that is actually too expensive to be relevant anymore. What we have become much more interested in the last decade or so, because we see the demand coming from across our client base, is how can we make that data, that insight accessible to those who might not be coming to us for underwriting, who we might not even want to underwrite. I mean, as an insurer based in Switzerland, we operate in 40 plus countries around the globe, but there's a lot of the globe we're not present. But that data and insights that we have around potential climate, can we get them to turn it down next door? Do you think? I might go deaf here. Sorry, forgive me. Maybe we just wait to see if it. If I put this on, okay.
Put this on, then it becomes much easier.
Now I can deafen myself. Yeah, sorry. Right. So where were we? We were talking about the value of the insurance risk modelling and risk engineering expertise for providing insights that would be useful outside of simply quoting premiums or providing insurance to people. And we see this as being extremely useful for a whole range of different potential clients of ours. But I think crucially, it's also this data, these insights should be used more by municipalities, by countries. And we've been doing a lot of work as Zurich over the last decade as part of something called the Insurance Development Forum, which is a UN-backed organisation which is working to improve access to insurance data and to improve and build insurance capability across emerging markets and developing economies. So those places where insurance doesn't currently exist, to make sure that there is access to insurance, and to also make sure that those countries and governments have the access to state-of-the-art modelling data that will help inform their understanding of future risk, and also crucially the quantification of potential benefits of investment to reduce that risk. And it's a very simple concept, but I think it's really important. If we don't have that understanding of a dollar figure against risk, and if we're not able then to say this resilience intervention, this investment could reduce that by another dollar figure, then we're going to struggle to mobilise finance in the way that we know we need to. And that's what we're really interested in trying to play into this debate, is we have these tools, we have this data. How can we start to ensure that they are available and used by governments as they start to think about their adaptation planning, and beyond that, how they can make use of that when they start to go to investors, when they're talking to the MDBs, when we're looking at developing blended finance structures. How can we feed in this data so that the quantification is clear and that we're able to get that benefit of resilience investment reflected in credit pricing as well as better access to insurance? And as the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, said very neatly last year, talking on this topic, if it's not insurable, it's not investable. Doesn't matter whether it's infrastructure, whether it's housing, whether it's any form of investment. If you can't insure it, you're not going to be able to get investment into it. So we have a strong common interest in helping build that insurance capacity. Did that answer your question? Sorry, I was very distracted by the sort of... they seem to be having more fun next door than we are here. I think we probably need to sort of pick up the noise a bit. I want some more audience feedback so we can compete.
Thank you so much, Matt. I'm going to come back to you with a follow-up question again. So, see, what you're trying to say is insurance sector cannot just sell insurance. They can also provide another product, which is risk analytics. So, but you really need to explain what that risk analytics is, because for us, we typically think that insurance sector provides you how hazards might pan out, and therefore your insurance might go up or premium might go up. But it would be really interesting to understand, how do you think your assessment is different from so many other models which are out there? Why is insurance sector risk analytics different from so many other actors who are, for example, I know BART has, we rely on CMIP 5, CMIP 6. So how is that different from what insurance sector does?
So I think the two things that would be different. I mean, one is simply the way in which we've built those models, and we'll be drawing on exactly the sort of modelling work and academic expertise that you're taking to the FCCC process. But we are building on a whole set of commercially available maps, but then adding into that our own models, our own data sets, and are increasingly now actually using AI to help us put together new data sets and get more and more precise in terms of understanding how specific hazards will impact particular geographies. So we have a tool that we've developed, and this is what we bring to the market, called Climate Spotlight, which currently maps 14 hazards through to 2100 against a range of UNFCCC scenarios. And it allows you to tune those hazards and those scenarios, and we do that by geolocation. So if you can give me a grid reference on the globe, the chances that I can give you a 2050 view as to what hazards will look like: 2.5 degrees, 3 degrees, 3.5 degrees. And that's a very useful tool for large corporates or private sector clients who want to understand, if they are trying to understand risk across their supply chains over time, how can they map that at a portfolio level. But what we then are able to add into that, and we enhance that sort of modelling view with risk engineering insight, is to bring our understanding of previous loss data in similar scenarios. So, you have a warehouse, we see this sort of level of flood risk, we know that the potential loss will be X. We also know from interventions in previous examples that the scope to reduce that loss could be Y. And that's where I think it gets really interesting, because what you can start to do then is provide very precise assessments of what the benefit of a particular resilience intervention will be.
Yeah.
You want to come in there, Bob?
That's exactly what I was going to ask, that you can also evaluate the risk reduction of intervention that is done. And we are talking about impact and adaptation metrics and indicators a lot on this meeting as well. It's part of the GGA negotiations. We are so keen to get proper calibrated data on how effective adaptation actually is in terms of its risk reduction. AR6 did do a fair job on trying to assess effectivity of adaptation, but it was pretty qualitative and limited to very limited number of studies. Having, say, structural access to a pool of data like yours would be so precious.
We should certainly see if that's possible to do. I mean, I would say always for insurers, loss data is essentially the value that they have as companies, so they're never going to give it away. But certainly there's got to be scope for feeding that in. And I think the work that you've done, Ritu, in the issues paper that's been published today, I'm sure everyone in the audience has read Ritu's paper, but it is a very good read. I recommend it. As soon as we've finished here, do download and have a look. But what we did with Ritu was a sort of exercise in sort of proof of concept, which was we used this Spotlight tool that we have to take 5 energy infrastructure locations across 5 diverse locations around the globe. I think it was the LATAM, South Asia, East Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. And we looked at what the hazards were going to look like through to 2050, and used the risk assessment off the back of that, combined with some World Bank metrics around potential resilience benefits, to start looking at. And this is the magic that Ritu, as the economist here, was able to produce, to start to look at what the benefits would be, versus no intervention with an intervention. And if you look at this across those countries, you start very quickly to get into tens of millions of savings on an annual basis, or avoided losses. It's important, it is avoided losses. And if you start to scale that up, if you think about the amount of investment that is due to go into infrastructure across developing countries over the coming decades, by ensuring that is resilient to these standards up front, you can save billions and billions. And it's that starts to frame the opportunity for investors in a way that I think isn't necessarily clear at the moment. It doesn't mean you don't need financial engineering and some smart structuring to be able to turn that avoided loss into an income stream, something you could pay a bond investor, but it starts to become much more possible, I think.
Thank you, Matt, for highlighting that. What it does is, and what I really want to highlight on the back of what Matt mentioned, is that kind of assessment that the insurance sector does makes it investable. It does not sound like, when you have that kind of analytics in your hand, investment in resilience does not look like a social enterprise. It does not look like a philanthropy work. It looks like a proper business case. It shows ROI of that investment in resilience, and that's what we really need to bring on the table more. If we have that kind of analytics, and if insurance sector is willing to provide that analytics as a separate standalone product, then that would really help in influencing the MDBs to come and create more pipeline of investment projects in resilience. It would influence private sector to come forward and invest more in resilience, not as a social or as an impact investment, but as an investment that can really bring real value to the investment. So I'm now going to turn to Ben. And Ben and I, we've been working very closely when Ben was the head of REAP, Risk Informed Early Action Partnership. So, and now Ben has joined another organization as associate director, which is called CDP, Center for Disaster Protection, which is all about bringing investment before disasters strike. And I know you have also it was a soft launch of that paper today, which really talks about how much of early finance is really available for resilience, and how much of that is being accessed or is available for access by least developed countries, small island states, and fragile and conflict affected states. So it'd be good to understand from you, Ben, the extent to which these finances are really reaching LDCs, SIDS, and FCAS, and why we need more of insurance sector analytics to make it go there, and also what can we really do to unlock some of those barriers around why those finances are not reaching where it should go.
Sure, thanks Ritu. Thanks for the invitation to participate. So just to explain, the Centre for Disaster Protection is a technical and advisory, technical and policy advisory organisation working to improve how we plan and pay for disasters. And as Tom mentioned at the outset, given that we're focused on debt and debt sustainability today, it's clear that high and growing debt levels and debt service burdens are having a detrimental impact on our ability and that of countries to invest in their disaster resilience, as well as to respond to disasters when they occur. So governments are often bearing the really high cost of disasters and often having to allocate resource after the event, often through budget reallocations, and this is having significant opportunity costs and impacting economic growth and recovery. As with so many things in life, you can get in a virtuous cycle of investing and becoming more resilient and attracting more investment, or into that negative spiral of debt and exposure and vulnerability and further debt and so on. So we've been looking at pre-arranging finance. We don't have to wait until the disasters happen and then raise resources to respond and invest in risk reduction and resilience. Much of the work can be done in advance of shocks, as well as pre-agreeing criteria for how those resources will be dispersed. And this can increase the predictability, the speed, the effectiveness of the response, as well as the recovery, and reduce the impact on lives and livelihoods. So to give a recent example, last week with Hurricane Melissa, the government of Jamaica was able to take out a cat bond, which has been met and released $150 million for Jamaica to be able to mount a response. And so, those are the kinds of products that are available, and we need to be having those conversations in advance. We don't have to wait until after the fact to raise the resources. So each year, for the last few years, the Centre has prepared a state of pre-arranged finance report, and this year's results are just coming in. We've got the early data, which shows that there are increasing investments in pre-arranged finance. So since the COVID response in 2019, this year actually has the highest levels of pre-arranged finance, much of that coming through World Bank, CAT DDOs, catastrophe deferred drawdown options, and it is spread across the board in terms of low-income countries, upper middle-income countries, high-income countries. But the research is also showing that less than 7% is within the low-income countries in the fragile and conflict-affected states. So those are the areas where we really need to invest. There's no excuse really for waiting until after the shocks. We need to have some of these conversations, look at the data, support governments to bring in the instruments required, layer the risk appropriately, so that we can mount a better response, but also look at the recovery and risk reduction in the longer term.
Thank you, Ben. And in fact, that also resonates with some of the analysis that we have done ourselves for a number of least developed countries, where it shows that by acting early and providing early resilience investment, you can reduce $22 billion of losses with just $4 billion of investment. You would have seen that we have two more panelists on the stage, and I think both of them are extremely important. One, an ambassador from a developed country, and one, an ambassador from a small island developing states. And I really wanted, even though we had a separate panel for that, I wanted them to come and take the stage so they could contribute to this discussion, because I'm really happy that this panel discussion has taken a slightly different tone. We are more conversational rather than responding to set questions. And so I'll first turn to Ambassador, Her Excellency Ambassador Roleta Thomas, who's the Climate Ambassador for Government of Antigua and Barbuda. The fact that Antigua Barbuda has a Climate Ambassador speaks a lot. And it also shows that small island developing states are almost looking at existential crisis in the next 10 years. And I'll leave to Ambassador to talk more about what they are doing under AMBAS and under Debt Sustainability Support Service. But before I hand over the mic to Ambassador, I just wanted to give a small background. See, we are all here at COP. It's a multilateral discussion. All countries get an equal seat on the table. But we are also on the 30th year. And in these 30 years, the sea level has risen a lot. The temperature, the global warming has happened. And small island developing states also know that they can't just keep waiting for another 10 years before they go completely underwater. And that's why they took matter in their own hands and they designed something called Debt Sustainability Support Service. Which, from the name itself, it might look like that this initiative is only about debt sustainability. But it's not about debt sustainability per se. It is about 4 pillars, which is one, looking at the intersection of climate and debt, because we know that every time a small island developing states, including a least developed country, is hit by a crisis, their debt levels keeps increasing. So one, we are talking about not just pause clauses and contingency clauses. We want to have a more integrated layered approach to debt sustainability. And we have shown through our analysis that the current levels of small island developing states debt can be brought down by almost 43% if all of those initiatives are combined. The second, and that's where I wanted Matt to stay on the dais here, is the second pillar talks about like you can give one-time relief on debt, but you can't. But we all know that states will continue to remain precariously exposed to disasters, so they'll again be pushed into debt. We don't want that. We don't want SIDS to again go out and the way Prime Minister Antigua Barbuda says, we don't want to go out with a begging bowl again, give us debt relief. So we want to protect their future, because every time you'll see that media gets splashed by after this hurricane, after this typhoon, 50%, 70%, 80% of GDP gets wiped out. So the second pillar of DSSS is about ensuring the GDP losses not the individual infrastructure by infrastructure. And that's again something I'll ask you, Matt, to respond to later. The third pillar is about where we're talking not just about the climate funds. We want the private sector and MDB investment to come into resilience building in small island developing states. And we also know that small island developing states are really small, so to bring in smaller investment becomes sometimes a bit transaction heavy. So we are talking about aggregate mechanisms for resilience bond, blue bond, green bond, and so on. And the fourth pillar is around capacity building on the range of issues around debt, around better research, and therefore part you come in, about, a lot of small island states are also trapped in predatory debt clauses. So the debt clause is such that they can never come out of it, and they remain sucked into vicious cycle of debt. So with all of these, so this particular initiative is about looking at an integrated solution to a whole lot of other issues that small island developing states face. And this initiative, now we just manage the interim secretariat right now, but the formal secretariat of DSSS was announced or formally launched at Tunga this year, and we are very happy that it's taken roots and now it will hopefully go forward. So I'm now going to turn on to Ambassador Yo to tell us more about what your vision is, how small island developing states really see this initiative, and how do you see it panning out within the Abbas agenda?
Thank you very much, Ritu, and thanks for my fellow panelists for the discussion so far. Before I go into the DSSS, I just wanted to reflect on something that was said earlier, and that's that the analytics help to prove the return on investment of resilience, investing in resilience. And I think that is true across the board and something that we really need to look at, because quite often in our Caribbean case, the analytics can be used opposite to that, and it can result in us being companies being risk averse to investment. But I think that the analytics can be turned on its head and to help us to become resilient. So I thought I would just make that point that quite often the data is used against us and not for us, and that's something that we need to look at, particularly when we're doing the IPCC assessments and we're looking at that data. We have to be careful about the context in which that data is reported and how it will be used going forward. Okay, so let me get back into the DSSS discussion. So of course, for Antigua and Barbuda and other SIDS, debt and climate impacts are inseparable. Actually, our whole development trajectory is linked to debt and climate change. It is that vicious cycle that we talk about, and for us, most of us are locked in the negative part of that cycle, and building resilience is challenging for a number of reasons. So when we have a climate shock and we have infrastructure destroyed, it reduces revenue and reduces our ability to service our existing debt and forces us to borrow more, and quite often at very high unfavorable rates to us, and that causes a negative reaction in terms of the decision making because of that precaution that we have to use when utilizing those limited funds at such high interest rates. So and of course that leads to this vicious cycle that we're in now. We are spending more and more of our debt servicing on health and of our income on debt servicing rather than health, education, and resilience building, which we need to do to get out of this circle. For the other thing is that when disaster strikes, other than prearranged financing, the only options we have are loans. And that's on the macro level, at the government level, the only options that we have are loans, and quite often, because of our risk factors, again, the interest rates are very, very high, and there are some adverse reactions to even investing, right? So even the private sector, whereas they would want to help, they cannot because of this risk factor. So what are we doing? Oh, that's a rain now. Well, listen carefully. So under the Antigua and Barbuda agenda for SIDS, so Antigua and Barbuda hosted the 2024 SIDS conference, and that's a 10-year plan and agenda for small island developing states. And under that, we have created a center of excellence. And under the center of excellence, we have established the debt sustainability support service. So what does the DSS do? So the DSS combines a number of instruments to reform climate resilience and making it work for financing and development. So it combines debt for nature swaps, climate contingent clauses in financing, resilience-linked bonds, and insurance-backed protection. And what that should result in is a platform that links debt management, climate finance, and infrastructure planning, which hopefully will get us out of this negative feedback loop that we're currently in now. So this model is not just for SIDS. I think it can be applied to all vulnerable countries and in all vulnerable sectors. This is a model that is trying to get us out of that negative feedback loop. It helps governments to create financial stability and fiscal stability while we invest in long-term adaptation. It embeds resilience directly into our financial systems, and we hope that it will be supported by development banks, insurers, experts, and the private sector. With respect to our partnership with the CDRI, I think there's a very, very clear message that we're sending now. There's no point in us restructuring our debt to incur new debt at higher terms and debt that will not result in a reduction in our vulnerability. And so that there's no point in building resilience if the debt burden makes it so that we cannot maintain the resilience. So all in all, the DSSS is meant to get us out of this feedback loop on in all corners. And then for me, with respect to the way forward, how we would like to see the DSS incorporated in the future is that we would like to see it embedded, the idea of the DSS being embedded into the global financing networks. That's very important for us. All of these frameworks need to consider DSSS as a way to actually move out of the burdens that we have, and that it could help to mobilize blended finance and philanthropic capital to scale resilient infrastructure, especially with that insurance piece that you were talking about earlier. I think that the DSS provides a bridge between financial reform and resilience building in investments. And so my final messages on this would be that, one without the other. If we don't have the debt relief, we cannot survive. If we don't have the resilience building, we cannot survive. And that our path to actually being on a more sustainable economic development path and to combat climate change needs to consider these types of issues.
You touched upon a very, very important point, and that is the data being used negatively. So this is the problem, and this is the problem that we're trying to address by bringing in more of insurance sector analytics on the table, because what it would do is not say that this is a hazard-prone area, don't go and invest there, but rather we say that if you invest in hazard reduction, then this is the return you can achieve, or this is the losses you can avoid. And obviously it's not, small island states are part of the whole supply chain globally. They are providing a lot of resources globally, so the world cannot survive without any of the small island states going away. So we do need to invest in their protection. I'll now turn to Ambassador Benoit Barako. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. And you can see Mother Nature wants a seat on the table as well. She's conveying her own anger in action. But I know France has been very, very active in this space, especially trying to address the debt sustainability issue, trying to bring resilience finance on the table. And there are a lot of international partnership through which it is trying to push some of these agenda forward, including through CDRI. So it'll be useful to understand from you as to how a developed country such as France can help take this agenda forward, especially helping small island states and these developed countries.
Well, thank you all, and thank you CDRI for these days and events, because I mean it's I'm the French ambassador, but I'm also lead negotiator for France, and I always feel smarter after a CDRI event, and I always feel a little bit dumb when we have conversation about adaptation and resiliency negotiating room. So I'm in family here with a lot of bright ideas, and I would like also to just take a moment to consider where we are in this particular building with all these beautiful Disco Brazil headsets, which for me shows the case for what is resilience exactly. We can say that sometimes it's very hot in this pavilion, sometimes it's very cold, sometimes we cannot hear us because of the rain, sometimes we have to use a fan in order to deal with the heat. And it demonstrates that resilience must be by design, and all these like small technology items can provide a short-term remedy to our problem. But if we don't address the problem at the root, which is basically by building resilient infrastructure, we will be in big trouble. So no, I think it's a very valuable lesson from Brazil to make us work in such conditions, because we experience what is bad resilience and what can be good resilience. Besides of that, I think that, and I was really keen to join this enlarged panel, because for me it's a very smart way to present the conversation, and I will come back to your question later on, but I would like to share some comments, because this year we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, and of course 10 years ago, to be honest, we were not as in-depth as we are today in terms of understanding that this topic will be the trending topic for the next decade. And I think we have to all to acknowledge that in terms of adaptation, resilience, we have made progress, but we are not there yet, and I think it's a good opportunity here in Belém to make a significant step toward all this discussion. And I'm very proud to be part of the CDRI with India and all the 51 country partners here, but also all the think tanks and very brilliant guys who are working on this, because basically you are trying to elaborate what is probably a missing part of the Paris Agreement. And so let's turn this energy of these days of discussion in small groups together in the side events to the plenary in the second week, in order also to make our best, because we all know also that despite the fact that we are progressing on LDCs, we are progressing towards the Paris Agreement goals, in a way the next decade is going to be super complicated for community at home, and I think we stand all in solidarity with all our partners in the SIDS who are facing all these events. But maybe just also to mention that I was very surprised by the way we only sometimes discussed resilience in terms of extreme weather events, and resilience is also on long-term impact. And I think it's very important to understand that dealing with resilience adaptation is not only dealing with a hurricane, it can be dealing with a mega trend in agricultural production, for instance. Sea level rise is not a single day you wake up and the sea is there, but it's a mega trend that amplify the consequences of extreme weather events. So we need to look both at extreme weather events that create big problems, including on debt, but also on long-term impact. And to share an experience we had from France, over the last 10 years, our farmers are deeply affected by climate change. We see that the yields are not there anymore. I mean, we have great technological progress to improve food production, but despite our investment in technology and innovation, I mean, we are not producing as much as we were supposed to do, and that's because of climate change. And the reality of it is that at the end of the day, first of all, it put tremendous pressure on public finance, because of course we are forced to compensate, as every country does in the world, host those economic losses, and it will not be possible on the long term. And I think that's very important to recall that. When I was younger, in the course of the Paris Agreement, we have this Stern reports demonstrating at the global scale that we will have a problem of GDP if we don't deal with climate change. And now we have tons of small problems of GDP in every sector, in every country, and the aggregation of it is super scary, to be honest, from a public perspective. But also, we need probably to understand that, and it's the case in France, and I'm sure it's the case in small as development sectors. They are already funding for adaptation resilience, and the problem is it's not fair because basically we are relying on private saving of communities to deal with climate impact, and this is profoundly unfair because those countries, the SIDS in particular, the LDC, they are not causing the problem, and now they are using private money to deal with climate external. It's true in Africa when you see communities selling their cattle in order to rebuild after a drought their house, or after a flood the house, for instance. That's the reality of adaptation now. And that's why we need to bring this conversation to another level. So maybe just to come back on a broader conversation on what can we do collectively here. I really think, and I was very, very pleased to hear what you said about data and gathering intelligence. I think we need all this data and I think our job as negotiator here in COP30 is to aggregate all this data and to fuel them in the system in order to correct the economic parameters. One interesting thing also about data is that it can use to demonstrate that sometimes resilience is bankable. For instance, we saw also in our farming sector in France that those farmers who have invested in resilience, basically they are in a way better position in the market, because when they have to face very, very severe drought, for instance, they are resilient, so they still produce, and the prices are going up just because all of the farmers are production decreasing, and so they make money about resilience. And it's the case also for infrastructure in France, for instance, for big infrastructure in the power system. Those who have already invested, they are in a position probably to make money on climate adaptation, and that's a very good signal. And that's why we desperately need all the data you produce to basically reparameter a little bit our economic system everywhere in the world. And I think it will be critical also to consider that sometimes there is also unbalance or inequality in terms of accessing to data. Of course, in France, we have a very rich country compared to a lot of countries on the planet. We have good quality data, and we know it's super useful, but we know also that in SIDS and in LDC, access to data is the very first step needed to build all our resilience infrastructure. I will not be very long on design of infrastructure. I think this building demonstrates that you have to anticipate every time before to do anything in this climate changing world, and maybe come back to more specific elements on your question. Design on finance will be super critical, and of course this question of debt is part of the Paris Pact for People and Planet. We totally agree, and I think it's not the end of the conversation, because exactly as you said, we have potentially one small part of the response. We can suspend debt for 1 year for one specific hurricane, but when the same hurricane or his brother coming 2 months after that, and then you know that the next year it's going to be 3 hurricanes, and probably you will have 1 year relief, and after that it will be another catastrophe. It's not sustainable, and that's why also I think we collectively need to mobilize our finance minister on this conversation, because for me, if we don't build a resilient and adaptive world, the next financial crisis could be a climate crisis, and it will start in SIDS and LDC definitely. So it will be probably regional, contained at the beginning, but on the long term it will affect all our economies. And that's why we will use our G7 presidency next year to continue this discussion and to add another layer probably which is needed. We all say, let's have a conversation with insurance and reinsurance guys. That's true, that's very true. But this conversation has not started yet, to be honest. Of course, it's a collective intuition that they can bring a lot in terms of data analysis, modeling, new innovative finance. but they are not at scale and they are not like facing the problems the way they do. So we will use also this G7 presidency to bring them on board on the conversation, probably to put a little bit more pressure on them. And my last comment will be also on the fact that we will probably need to bring more money on the table for adaptation and resilience. It's critical. We are advocating here for global solidarity levy with our partners, including Kenya, Barbados, but also Spain, France, and we are trying to find a larger coalition to have a contribution for luxury aviation, which can basically help to build resilience at the community level. It's something that is very important. It's already in the Baku to Belém roadmap, and we definitely agree with our brothers and sisters in the SIDS that if we don't bring more public money on the table, it will be very, very complicated to align all the parameters, I mean investors, but also public finance from the developing economies in the direction of resilience. So that's a top priority for France in this conversation. Sorry for being so long, but I mean it's very, very exciting discussion. I'm so happy to be with you, and just congratulations to CDRI for the job done. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And in fact, it's a breath of fresh air to hear a negotiator talking like that, and especially a negotiator from a developed country. Really very, very great insight, and I'm happy that you are saying that in G7 presidency you are going to give priority to insurance sector and the insurance sector and for them to be brought on the table. And this is the reason exactly why data and knowledge and information becomes so important, that in a discussion on debt sustainability and resilient infrastructure, we brought insurance and we brought IPCC on the panel here, because there is a historical imbalance which needs to be corrected. You look at the global south, how much of them are really insured? They are not. Because one, of course, the affordability, but also because of lack of information. You know, what's at stake and what can be avoided, or at least can be protected. And that's why in the DSSS, we made sure we brought insurance on the table. And we are very happy that DSSS was able to pull in. World Bank is sitting on the table, ADB is sitting on the table, and a lot of private sector investors and others. We do need insurance to be sitting on that table as well. So maybe next time we'll have Matt from Zurich sitting in the next meeting. But I'm also happy that Bart, you are taking that initiative where because that data needs to be, that ecosystem for data generation has to be developed. And data becomes so powerful in the negotiations room, nobody else would know better than you, Ambassador. So it is important that we all work collectively and that table becomes bigger and we bring in more voices. And that brings me to my next panelist who's sitting in the audience here. Because when we talk about resilience, we only talk about infrastructure. And we do need to bring in the community resilience perspective as well. So I'm going to bring in Emiliano. And I keep pronouncing, just like Bart, I kept calling you Winston. So I keep calling his organization. The English name is Institute for Zero Hunger. No, I'm going to bring him. Come. The actual name of his organization is Instituto Fomo Zero. Is that right? Okay. Kind of right. Okay. So you can correct me later. So Emiliano, we would really need to understand from you as to what effort, because we know Brazil has one of the world's best social protection program. And social protection program really play a big role in terms of creating community resilience, because we know that when communities are hit by crisis, the first thing we talk about is providing food aid, providing cash transfers. But how is Brazil or your organization really working towards making those social protection programs more effective in terms of dealing with or creating climate resilience?
Well, thank you, Ritu, and thank you everyone for this fine discussion. I made some notes, so I will read because this is not my native language, so it will be easier. First of all, for our countries here in Latin America and the Caribbean, especially for SIDS and LDCs, climate impacts are not only environmental, they are fiscal also. This is very important for us. Each flood, drought, or cyclone reduces our public revenues, increases the debt, and forces our energy spending that could otherwise build resilience. Social protection and infrastructure must therefore be seen together as twin investments in resilience and fiscal stability. So the Instituto Fome Zero, Zero Hunger Institute, was born about 20 years ago with this integrated vision. 20 years ago, the Fome Zero strategy was launched and adopted in Brazil as a governmental program, connecting social protection, family farming, and public infrastructure. We built school kitchens, local markets, food banks, cisterns, and rural roads. Those investments created an ecosystem and strengthened our food system while reducing the vulnerability to shocks. Every dollar invested generated multiple returns, improved nutrition, higher local incomes, and lower emergency spending. Today, the same logic underpins our work with IIED through the Aspire Protection Index. The Aspire roadmap in Brazil assessed our key programs such as Bolsa Familia, PAA, direct buy from agriculture smallholders, and PNAE, school meals program. Through a resilience lens asking how they could act before crisis rather than after. The results showed that anticipatory social protection when combined with resilient infrastructure, reduces fiscal exposure and social losses dramatically. For every dollar invested in early preventive measures, governments save between $2 and $5. Vito said something close to it before. And avoided humanitarian and reconstruction costs, very important. This is precisely the kind of cost-effective approach that can be complemented, that complement the debt sustainability mechanism, like the DSSs. In Brazil, at the semi-arid or savanna, the northeast of the country, local community built more than 1 million of cisterns, many through our social protection linked public works programs. These cisterns, store rainwater for household consumption and small-scale irrigation, ensuring food production during the droughts. The program was financed by the social protection budgets and the Federation of the Banks here in the country, and delivered through the community associations, a model where infrastructure is itself a form of protection. Such initiatives avoided costlier alternative of emergency water trucking and crisis aid, a clear case where anticipatory reduce debt. In the Amazon region, municipal governments and indigenous associations are now investing in community food banks, solar cold storage hubs, and small river transportation systems to secure local supply chains when the floods isolate their victims. These facilities were built upon the institutional legacy of Fome Zero program. Public procurement from family farmers, participatory councils, and school feeding logistics, showing how social and physical resilience reinforce each other. The infrastructure protects food system while the food systems sustain livelihoods, and local fiscal circulation. Across Latin America, this lesson is consistent. Resilient infrastructure works best when embedded in social protection and food system governance. The first, Community-led planning ensures that infrastructure responds to local needs, reducing maintenance costs and political risks. Second, when infrastructure creates productive assets, irrigation, storage, and transport, it raises household incomes and tax revenues, improving fiscal balance. And the third, predictable social protection transfers stabilize consumption during crises, sustaining demand for local goods and avoiding macroeconomic contraction. These mechanisms together form a resilience dividend, protecting people, markets, and public budgets. In a fiscal sense, anticipatory systems act like insurance. They spread risk over time and across sectors, preventing sudden fiscal shocks. This is why Instituto Fome Zero argues that social protection and resilient infrastructure should be treated as instruments of debt management and fiscal policy, not just for social. Linking these insights to today's discussion on debt sustainability, I must say, fiscal vulnerability in climate-exposed economies arises because spending is reactive and unplanned. By integrating anticipatory social protection with resilient infrastructure, governments can reduce contingent liabilities, the implicit fiscal risks from future disasters. This creates also a space to renegotiate and restructure debt based on resilience metrics, aligning with the objectives of Article 2 in the Paris Agreement. Brazil's experience suggests that public infrastructure for food systems, the food banks, the school kitchens, the rural feeder roads, and the community systems can serve as qualifying investments for resilience-linked bonds and debit for climate swaps. These assets generate both social and fiscal resilience and can be monitored through transparent indicators such as reduced food loss, lower emergency expenditures, and improved school attendance. The same model can inspire other countries seeking to link their debt portfolios with long-term adaptive capacity. In practice, the integration works through three policy levels: planning, national adaptation plans, and infrastructure pipelines must include social protection and food system priorities. Finance, the second. Climate funds and MDBs should allow subnational governments to direct access blended instruments for social infrastructure resilience. And the third, governance. Local councils and civil society networks should oversee delivery, ensuring that infrastructure benefits women, farmers, and vulnerable groups first. The Aspire framework provides a methodology for this integration, and it evaluates readiness across 5 dimensions, producing an actionable roadmap that countries can adopt. Extending this framework across Latin America and Caribbean could help governments to demonstrate fiscal savings and anticipatory measures, strengthening their case on debt relief negotiations. The broader measure from our region is simple. The broader message from our region is simple. Resilience pays off. Countries that invest in prevention through social protection linked infrastructure spend less on recovery, maintain creditworthiness, and protect development gains. Building on Fome Zero legacy, IFZ and IIED are now working to integrate these lessons into the global DRI action agenda, ensuring that food systems and social inclusion are central to resilient infrastructure finance. As we look ahead to the operationalization of the Fund for Responsibility, Loss and Damage, and the expansion of resilience-linked finance, we urge that food system and social protection be recognized as core pillars of fiscal resilience. The infrastructure of resilience is not only for roads and bridges, it's also for cisterns, the kitchens, the warehouse, and the school gardens. Each of these assets protects lives, stabilizes budgets, and strengthens confidence in the future. In closing, the Latin America experience shows that when communities, governments, and partners align social protection with resilient infrastructure, they break the cycle of disaster, debt, and dependence. The Instituto Fome Zero stands ready for all the countries and the partners for this, to share these tools and build resilience not only on the physical and financial, but also on the humanitarian and social part.
Thank you so much, Emiliano. I think you fixed the missing gap in that panel discussion and bringing in that community perspective, and why bringing community perspective in all the design of resilience, whether it's physical or community or governance institution, why it's so important. In closing, I'm going to bring in Ramesh Subramaniam to please come in and give your final thoughts of what you're thinking.
Hey, this is a very, very meaningful conversation, so greatly appreciate. In fact, Ritu, I'm thinking exactly with these people, we should take the work forward. And with the taping, I think we will create a transcript and work with all of you. But just some thoughts. First is we've been talking about fantastic points on resilience, and if you're looking at resilience dividend, we've all been talking about it, but the question is, how do we amplify it? How do we take it forward to actions? By the way, next week on the 17th of November, we will be launching a new report, our second biennial on the Global Infrastructure Resilience Report, which in fact the good news is that the resilience dividend, or the returns to investing in resilience, we are demonstrating quite clearly that the number is much larger. In fact, investing $1 can lead to $7 to $12 in terms of returns. So the case is there, but then the challenge is what next? How do you take it forward? Now, the insurance conversation the two of you were having, quite fascinating, but many other insights came as well. Insurance will require resilience to be included in every step of the project. It cannot be an afterthought. It's got to be embedded into the project cycle from the beginning in terms of identification, pipeline planning, identification, design, appraisal, execution, and then operation and maintenance is also very critical, not just in early stages of design. Procurement is a major issue, but then the 6% figure that we are looking at, only 6% of the infrastructure assets are covered. I think 6% is probably an overstatement. If you look at particularly municipal assets, I think the coverage is probably 0.5%. Like in Indonesia and Philippines, my earlier job used to work for about 15 years creating municipal pools. The job is not done yet. The two countries, ring of fire, they still don't have the system. But so the demand-supply balance for insurance will be very complex because of the subdued investments in resilience. So the question is, how do we take it forward? But the fiscal risks that Ambassador from Antigua Barbuda you highlighted of not investing in resilience, and the point, Benoit, that you made on data, how do we really use data in terms of bringing fiscal risk considerations? So I think that whole dilemma and debt relief on the one side, and then investment needs for resilience, and if you don't invest, what are you losing? Clearly we need to look at. So all of them very, very interesting but complex in strengthening pre-arranged financing. But I think, lot of ideas have come. So the optimism is that if we crack the formula, at least for, we in CDRI in our finance work, we are looking at, is there a class of investments in infrastructure where we can bring in this resilience dividend much more and show through existing regional pools, like for example, Southeast Asia Disaster Risk Financing Facility, which is very small but can be capitalized at more, bring in more insurance, working with reinsurers to show that that class of infrastructure can really be much more bankable than what we've been able to achieve so far. So I think fascinating discussions. I'm very happy you convened this and look forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ramesh, and thanks a lot to all of our panelists, because all of you brought in different perspectives. from science to insurance to policy, but and community, but also both ambassadors bringing in different perspectives from a developing country. That's really, really useful. So yes, we need to all work together.